Hello everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel for a new Diablo 4 video today, and today we're going to be taking down Uber Lilith with the rogue build. Yes, the one I've been posting and been working on. Now you can just swallow up phase 1 and phase 2 of Lilith, basically super easy, and as you can see you can do 40, 50, even 60 million damage here. I want to start off first with the skill tree very quickly and just go over some of the things that we've taken. So for our skills, we're going to take Puncture all the way to Fundamental Puncture, our primary source, to make Uber Lilith vulnerable very easily. Keep in mind, in the video description and pinned comment, there's a quick reference guide for all the skills, Paragon points, everything, in case you want to pull that up and save it or follow along. Also, we're going to take Twisting Blades, obviously, over to Improved for the Dazed. Then we're going to get Sturdy and Siphoning Strikes for 3 out of 3. We're going to come down here and take 1 out of 5 for Shadow Step, and we want to get to Methodical Shadow Step so we can Shadow Step to Uber Lilith, as you can see in the gameplay, and this provides us with a great source of original CC on our enemy. Firstly, one big thing that keeps me refreshed when gaming is playing Bloodline Heroes of Lithis, who is today's sponsor. Bloodline is the most unique gacha gameplay I've ever played, and it's set as a dark fantasy RPG where you can create all kinds of new champions, collect them from all different types of rarities, battle in Bloodline, and create champions with over 4,000 different customizations. Scan the QR code in the top right corner or check the description to try out Bloodline. Heroes of Lithis has a ton of in-game activities to do, so much you'll never get bored, and it's legitimately one of the most fun mobile games I've honestly ever played. It's the perfect side game with amazing graphics. You can level up your town and districts to get more gold and build up your kingdom. You can also do things like raise children or heirs in the game to create new and interesting champions. The gameplay is very strategic. There are constant updates and new events that are added very often every single fortnight, and all kinds of new content that's constantly added to the game. For instance, one new thing is the Tide Raisers Bloodline, who are powerful sea demigods. Once you level up your champions very high, there's also rewarding late game PvP where players can get unique hybrid champions or Bloodcraft legends by participating in seasonal guild wars. With all Bloodline has to offer, download the game free on Android or iOS using my link in the description below, or by scanning the QR code if you're on PC. If you do this, you get a special starter pack, and the first 30 players to actually put their in-game account IDs and username both in the pinned comment section below will actually get a very powerful free legendary hero. Thank you Goat Games and Bloodline for sponsoring today's video. This is going to help build the stagger bar for Lilith to make sure you're doing the most damage possible very, very quickly. Next, we're going to go for Dash. Now, you can pick 2 different things here. You can take Smoke Grenade at the beginning for an additional CC effect to help stagger her, or you can just take Dash, which is what I do because you don't really need Smoke Grenade. So I just take Dash so that way I have increased movement, especially getting ready for phase 2 of the fight. Then we're going to want to take 1 point and Poison Trap and all the way to countering Poison Trap, so we have a % chance to reset our imbuement skill. Then we're going to come down here with Poison Imbuement and take as many points as you can here, so 5 out of 5. Blended Poison Imbuement for our max poison damage. Deadly Venom here maxed. 1 out of 3 for Alchemical Advantage for increased attack speed, boosting up our attack speed and overall damage very high with this. Precision Imbuement 3 out of 3. 3 out of 3 for Frigid Finesse. This is going to give us increased chilled and frozen damage. Then we also want our primary other things that help us with our lucky hit, because this build is based around being able to proc lucky hits, so that way you can proc the poison pool and get infinite poison imbuments. You need Innervation here for 3 out of 3, Alchemist Fortune 3 out of 3, Trap Mastery for 3 out of 3. And again, these 2 are going to give you a lot of additional lucky hit chance. You can also, if you want, take Second Wind here for additional lucky hit chance if you're having that problem, and that is an option. Then you want 1 out of 3 for Adrenaline Rush, and then 3 out of 3 for Haste. So we get increased either movement speed or increased attack speed. And then finally, we want Close Quarters Combat. This is going to give us 30% increased damage overall, boosting our damage by a lot, allowing us to basically one-shot Uber Lilith during her stagger phase to skip all of the phases of the fight entirely. For our specialization, you're going to be running combo points. This is the ideal one we want to run because it gives us the most amount of max damage that we can possibly have. And then we'll touch on our gear really quick. So as you can see, if you're trying to compare your attack power, when I move, my attack power goes down pretty decent, but we do have one of the aspects here bumping it up, so just keep that in mind when looking at this. Now, this is a lot different from the tier 100 Nightmare build because it's specifically tailored to beat Uber Lilith. So first, the aspect we're going to use is the Mangler's aspect. This is going to make it so when hitting a vulnerable enemy, we have a big chance to daze them. Every time we basically hit this daze on Lilith, it's going to bump up her stagger bar again, getting her to the point where you can do the massive amount of damage that you want to do. Ranks of Poison Imbuement, cooldown reduction, and max life are good here, but I'm using most of this gear from my Nightmare dungeon build, so I'll talk about the main things you need and throw up the best things on the screen, and all of the updated stuff will be in the guide in the description. For our chest, you're basically going to want to have as much damage on here as possible, so poison damage, overall damage, cutthroat skill damage, and damage percentage are big ones that you can have, and you want the Exploiter's aspect on here, so that way for Unstoppable unstoppable enemies, you deal 40% increased damage to them. This is a big damage bump that you definitely want. And then for your gloves, ideally you want a really good roll here for this aspect, but we want the aspect of Inner Calm, so that way when standing still we get 30% increased damage. Once Lilith is staggered, this is going to be a huge benefit to doing the max damage you can possibly do. You want critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, dexterity, and twisting blades here is perfectly fine for this roll. Then for our pants, we want the aspect of might. You don't have to have this, you can swap it out for some other aspect if you want, but I like it because it does give us overall damage reduction, and I wouldn't worry about getting max damage pants, but if you can get damage on your pants and those kind of affixes, make sure you do that. It's just going to add to your overall damage, but again, I'm just using my DR pants from my nightmare build and it works perfectly fine. For our boots, we want the aspect of noxious ice. This is going to help dealing additional poison damage to frozen and chilled enemies. This is a big one to have. For our crossbow here, we want aspect of corruption so that our imbuement skill does increase potency against vulnerable enemies, drastically increasing our overall poison damage. And these are the ideal stats you'll want on your crossbow as well as your weapons if you can get them. You do want to get 2 daggers here, so you want the Ashira's Kanjar Ancestral Dagger for the additional attack speed that it gives and some of just the other stats as well as the lucky hit chance. You also want to make sure, again, stacking lucky hit chance as much as you can like on your gloves. For your other dagger, again, you want the same stats as the crossbow basically, but we're going to use the aspect of bursting venoms here so that way we proc that pool that basically gives us infinite restore on our poison imbuement. And then for our ring, we're going to be using the blade dancers aspect for our twisting blades, again just upping that damage, and the wrathful heart for increased poison damage or DOT damage over time. And you can see on unstoppable enemies, bosses are going to take 140% additional damage, which is huge. And for both rings, you want resource regeneration, lucky hit chance, vulnerable damage, and crit strike damage. And ideally for rings, the best stats here are lucky hit chance, vulnerable damage, crit strike chance, and crit strike damage for both rings. But you can see even with mine being pretty far off that, as long as you have lucky hit chance, you can still deal out a massive amount of damage normally. Then for our other ring, we want the aspect of pestilent points. So every third cast of puncture gives you additional poison imbuement on your regular dagger for your normal puncture attack. This is a big one that you absolutely need. This is going to help us proc our bursting venoms for infinite poison imbuement all of the time. You have to run this imbuement now, otherwise this build just does not work and is not viable. And then for our amulet, we want the accelerating aspect on that so we get increased attack speed for our overall attacks, allowing us to dish out a ton of more damage. And ideally here, I like +3 ranks of all imbuement skills for our poison imbuement, +3 ranks of the deadly venom passive for additional poison damage, dexterity percentage or overall damage percentage if you can get it, and then 40% imbuement skill damage or cutthroat skill damage is also good here too. Again, all of the best affixes will be in that guide. I'm just primarily going over the important aspects you'll need to make this build work 100%. The other 2 big important pieces that I would recommend you get, even if they're not very high level, and upgrading them is your Penitent Greaves. This is going to allow us to do a decent amount of stagger damage to Lilith and basically chill her for additional stagger. And then our Fists of Fate deal a ton of stagger damage. So that way you basically can walk into the fight, have both of these on and stagger her. Once our stagger bar gets kind of like 3/4 of the way full or almost full, you can then swap back to your regular gloves and your regular boots with both aspects on them, and that way you can start dealing out the massive amount of damage and ramping up your poison damage since you're then about to stagger her. But these 2 items, the Fists of Fate and the Penitent Greaves, are very, very good for basically staggering her almost in like 15 or 20 seconds. In almost like 15 or 20 seconds, they're that good. So highly recommend if you get those, put those on at the start of the fight. And then when you're about to stagger her, switch over, ramp up your poison damage, and then just go to town easy. Then for our Paragon board, this is the setup we're going to be running. We're going to be running with the starter board. We're going to slot the closer glyph here. This is going to give us cutthroat skill damage, boosting our overall and poison damage basically for our twisting blades. And that additional cutthroat damage once maxed out is going to be very important to add to our overall damage, and you do take 10% reduced damage once your additional bonuses are met. Just follow these boards and copy them exactly verbatim and you will have absolutely no problem. Next, we're going to take the Deadly Ambush board. With this board, you're going to get 23% increased critical strike damage for enemies affected by your trap skills, and you're going to get the Bane glyph here, and this is going to increase our overall poison damage. And another big thing is poisoning damage. Once you meet these actual requirements or the additional ones, you get a 10% chance to double the amount of poison, which stacks on top of each other, giving us massive, massive amounts of damage. Again, there's an engineering node here and some other nodes. Again, just copy these exactly how I'm showing them to you. Then we're going to want this board right here. The next one is going to be Cheap Shot. And for the Cheap Shot board, you're going to want to socket the Efficacy glyph. Now, this is the glyph I just really like to use here because it gives us that imbuement skill effects have 20% increased potency, bumping up, again, our poison damage by quite a lot. Next, we want this board, which is the No Witnesses board. This board, we want to socket the Exploit glyph for vulnerable, but we also want to do it for the additional damage we get to vulnerable enemies, which we make Lilith all of the time. This is a huge multiplicative thing here, so we get an additional 43% vulnerable damage, greatly increasing our damage since she'll be vulnerable like every single second of the fight. And then next, we want to come over here and take the Cunning Stratagem board. And then here we're going to slot the Turf glyph so we get that additional damage to close enemies. This is going to be a big one, as well as 10% damage reduction again against close enemies. And then for our final board, we want the Exploit weakness board, and we're going to take this glyph so when you deal damage to a vulnerable enemy, you're going to get basically 15% increased damage overall throughout the fight, another big damage boost. And you want combat here. This is going to give us additional energy restore cost. This, when the additional requirements are met, give us additional energy restore. And then we're also going to get a ton of extra critical strike damage here for our critical strikes. This board in its entirety, which again is in the description below, which is broken down with every single glyph you need. It's a quick reference guide. Make sure to check that out. Once you set this up this way, you're going to run through Uber Lilith with no issues whatsoever. And ideally, the way the fight works, again, you want your Fists of Fate and your Penitent Greaves on so you can stagger her quickly. Once you start the fight, you want to hit Shadow Step and Poison Trap as much as you can to get the most amount of stagger on her over and over and over. You can use your Poison Imbuement immediately if you want. You just want to make sure you don't stagger her so quickly. You just want to make sure you don't go past that first bar before you stagger her, because she'll go into the second phase. Now, once she gets close to getting staggered, you're going to switch back to your regular gloves and your regular boots. You're going to basically go with your Punctured or your Twisting Blades until you can proc Poison Imbuement non-stop. Once that Poison Imbuement procs non-stop, you're just going to start spamming your Poison Imbuement, Poison Trap, and your Puncture and your Twisting Blades, and just maxing out the amount of damage you can do, since it's a never-ending poison damage. And like I mentioned, a lot of this equipment is not built for overall damage, but I'm still able to do easily 50 million. And even with the gear that I have, which isn't even close to perfect, it's not even really necessarily good in terms of the damage affixes I have on this gear, because it was built for Nightmare Dungeons. That being said, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you've taken out Uber Lilith already in the description below. If not, use this build and you'll have no problems. Good luck, guys. Thanks.